Now, the Ghana Statistical Service says about 77.4% of Ghanaian household populations have seen a drop in their finances since the outbreak of COVID-19 in the country. The outfit made the statement public based on a recent survey with the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, and the World Bank on the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 on households and jobs. Government statistician Professor Samuel Kobina Enim revealed these details in a press conference, explained that some 22 million citizens have been hit by a reduction in their incomes since March. I have here in the studio Omar Saidu. He's research coordinator with the Ghana Statistical Service. So we can break this down briefly before we go to Parliament for what is happening there as well. Mr. Omar, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So 22 million people have a fall in their income. That's what the report says. Does it give us a range? For example, let me first start with the areas that the research, the survey focused on. Which areas did you study?
Yeah, so thank you very much, and thank you for having me. The research initially looked at knowledge and attitudes, attitudinal change around COVID. Then we looked at issues around education, health, food security, incomes and jobs, coping mechanisms, and safety nets that are violence and crime as well. Okay. And some part of it focused on children.
Right. Yeah. But which specific areas did you do from where you collected your data, or which areas are we looking at here?
Yeah, so all these areas that I've mentioned, the data collection.
No, I mean
you mean the coverage?
Exactly.
Yes, so it's a nationwide representative sample survey, and I think that is very important to indicate. You recall that we did a Ghana Living Standard Survey, the most recent one, round 7. So had a 15,000 household sample size. So we took a subsample of that. And we were focused, we were targeting 4,000 households nationwide, covering all the 16 regions. But eventually we had 3,265 completing the survey.
I see.
Yeah.
So 4,000 households, you say?
That's what we're targeting.
Okay. To what extent is the coverage representative?
Yes, the coverage is quite representative, but because it is telephone interviews, you realize that some regions, especially some of the new regions, are somehow disadvantaged. For instance, Northeast. We didn't have a good number of respondents from there, but of course that does not mean that for the general estimates we are unable to have a fair estimation. But if you want to break it down to some specific ones, then it would not be very wise to do a disaggregation at that regional level because of the number of cases in this case.
So I talked about the amount, the number of people involved. You're saying that in your conclusion or in your analysis that 22 million people had a fall in their income.
Yeah.
What we say 22 million people, what are the characteristics of these people?
Well, it's everybody. We wanted to find out if from 16th of March, when the first mobility restrictions were introduced in the country, if there has been a decrease, an increase, or maybe stability in the income that the household usually have, the period prior to COVID-19, that is the period before 16th March. And we had over 75% of the households indicating that they have had a decrease in their household income. As to how much decrease, because 2 cities can be a decrease. Yeah. 10 million can be a decrease. But as to how much the decrease is, that is the part that we didn't investigate in this particular
But at least you can tell that this number of people or this number of households have lost income.
Exactly.
And in these households, was it a specific, was it some sort of purposive sampling, or you just did a random sampling?
This is a scientific probability sampling. And it's a methodology that has been developed, and we work with the World Bank. And Ghana is not the only country doing this. Many other countries are doing the same thing, except that in our case in Ghana, we seem to be doing much more than many other countries are doing. So
I just wanted to, I'm asking this because I want to know what the characteristics are. So, for example, what sort of work do the people in these households do? Are they vendors? Do they have, you know, 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 jobs? Do they have are they contract workers? You see what I mean? So that we'll be able to have an idea which people. So there are people who have lost their jobs. Bankers have lost their jobs. People who work within the hotel industry, for example, most of them lost their jobs. Some of them had to take half pay. Teachers in private schools, for example. So I want to understand which people, when we say 22 million people, who are the people? Yeah,
for instance, if you look at those who were mostly affected in terms of decrease in income, there were people who reported that their income, the household income, is largely from non-farm family business.
Okay.
And you will realize that many such people are in the informal sector.
Okay.
Where we had a least reduction is those who are earning wages. People who are earning wages.
Okay.
And people who, so we looked at many other areas.
Yeah.
So 36%.
I mean, at least this gives us an idea. Yes. So people who are within the informal sector, people who earn your normal monthly wages, and then people who run family businesses.
Yes. So remittances, some people rely on remittances.
Yeah.
So for instance, so those who rely on remittances, the decrease was also almost 80%.
Wow.
Okay.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all know the effect of COVID-19, but when we break it down like this, then it gives you an idea how much. So the government put in some efforts to, you know, some interventions to essentially cushion these people. Was there a part of the research that talks about the expectations of these people on the back of their losses? Do they have any expectations?
Yes, generally there's some anxiety in the population relating to what COVID-19 is likely to leave us with. But we also are mindful of the fact that a lot of the interventions that came in when we had already started data collection, and so it will not affect everybody. Some interventions came in earlier, and so that is why we intend to do this as a tracer study. So we'll go back to the same households in August, and then we want to see what has changed from the time we came. The first wave was done, and then the second wave. So we can measure what has changed over time.
Interesting. It's interesting. I mean, if you're listening to a statistician give you figures, you might, you know, feel a bit reserved because, I mean, not all of us like figures. But essentially, the point is that 22 million of us lost income. And it especially affected people who work within, you know, the informal sector. You know, we do a lot of buying and selling. We do a lot of, you know, our own businesses. So these people will mostly have been affected. Those who collect wages as well have been affected. And those who wait for Western Union or money from abroad, they've also been affected. Let me take your final thoughts, Mr. Saidu, as we wrap up. What next? I mean, these surveys are done by the statistical service, but then we also see a lot of donor support going in there. Is it that we personally, I mean, we as Ghanaians are not really interested in getting that information, or we don't have the wherewithal to do it without these supports?
Yeah, I think it's all about priorities. And for us in GSS, this has been one of the key priorities we've had since the COVID. And so we started this, and then the donors also, some of them were interested in the same thing, and so they came in to support. But it does not mean that they were driving it.
I see. So then my question is, as we wrap up, what next? Usually when you have done these surveys, what have they helped us achieve? I
think this particular survey is one that provides us a very important insight, because you realize that our ability as a country to adequately combat COVID goes beyond the case numbers. We need to know how many children, for instance, are missing their routine vaccinations as a result of COVID. How many pregnant women are not receiving ANC as a result of this? And this would actually help the line ministries adequately plan to intervene. So this is very useful, and we believe that the government will find and use it to support it.
I agree. It's useful. It's useful. I mean, at least we have an idea. We all know that there's been an impact, but at least this breaks it down and gives us an idea who is missing out on what. I would just have loved to know the specific communities, for example, so that we can shift, if we need to shift attention in terms of other interventions, we can put it there. But
yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah, but in this regard, you would not want to go community because the sample size would not be adequate for you to look at communities. But for instance, one key thing, we realize that 35% of children in basic schools are not doing any learning at home, whilst they're at home within this period. And naturally, you wouldn't know that that is happening.
Yeah.
But at least now you have an idea. And so if you disaggregate this, and you know which regions are most affected, where many children are not learning. Okay, right. And so these are some of the things that...
it's interesting. I mean, research is interesting, the things they can help you uncover. And I find it very interesting, except that I've run out of time. But thank you very much for coming and breaking it down for us. Umar Seidu is the research coordinator at the Ghana Statistical Service, running us through the recent survey that they have done that is showing us that 35% of children are not doing any learning at all. Those, I mean, some are doing online, but you know, not everybody has access to internet. The research they've done shows that 35% of our children are at home doing nothing, probably being bad boys and girls. So hopefully the Education Ministry will turn its attention to that area as well. But 22 million of us have lost money. That's what the research says.